to be with all of you today. Since 1922, First National has earned the trust of Alaskans. Today, as we begin our 100th year of serving Alaska, the bank's commitment to helping you and our communities has never been stronger. My fellow hosts are Senior Vice Presidents Carl Heinz and Chad Stedman, both of whom are just as excited as I am to share their expertise as it relates to the ins and outs of PPP funding. Senior Vice President and Branch Administration Director Carl Heinz first joined the bank in 2003. Today, he oversees all phases of the lending and deposit process in branch communities outside Anchorage. Hi, Carl. Would you like to say a quick hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've spent the last 18 years working for First National Bank all over Alaska, from Kodiak to Glen Allen to Soldotna, Heinz, and now called Kenai home. As a lifelong Alaskan and son of a small business owner, nothing makes me more proud than being able to serve Alaskans every day, especially in these uncertain times. The Payroll Protection Program is just one of the many tools that First National Bank Alaska has to help Alaskans.
Well, thanks, Carl. Thanks for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. And now to introduce our other co-host, Chad Stedman, Senior Vice President and Corporate Lending Director for the bank, who grew up in Kenai Peninsula. In his role at First National, Chad utilizes his experience in commercial lending underwriting and lending to coach First National skilled corporate lending bankers. Hi, Chad. Welcome.
Hey, Denise.
Would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I've been in banking for over 20 years, with 10 of those years with First National Bank Alaska. I love working with businesses, community businesses, and helping them succeed and grow their businesses. Like Denise mentioned, I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula, and watching and looking at these businesses as they're going through this turmoil has been really tough. And this is such a great way that we've been able to kind of reach out and help them. Like I said, I still have a lot of friends and family on the Kenai Peninsula. I see these river guides, commercial fishermen, hotel owners like the King Salmon Inn, even the Moose is Loose, the local bakery there that shut down. I'm wondering, where do you get a good apple fritter nowadays? All these restaurants and such that have been impacted by COVID and how they're trying to recover. And so this is such a great way for us to be able to give back and to help these businesses to redeploy some capital and help them get through and over this situation. First National Bank has a great history of working at tough times with businesses, and this is no different. We're here to help and support as much as we possibly can. So I know for me, like I said, we're all connected. I have my family. I love raising my family now in Anchorage. I've got 6 kids and a wonderful wife, and we're connected to this community, and we want to see it succeed and to overcome the challenges that are out there right now. Denise, back to you.
Thanks, Chad. Thank you. It's really great to have both of you here today. I appreciate you guys giving your time and your expertise. Now, before we get started with today's program, I just would like to mention a few housekeeping items, and that is all participant mics and cameras have been turned off, and that's just to help us with the overall flow of the program. But we do want you to be engaged, and we encourage all of you who are connected via the webinar to use the Q&A function to submit questions. And if you're watching the Facebook live stream event, please feel free to post your questions, and we'll be quick to respond to you just as soon as we can. And then following today's webinar, we're going to post all the questions and all the answers on fnbalaska.com/webinar. So everyone participating today, or maybe if you have friends that didn't get a chance to watch today's webinar, they can certainly rewatch the webinar and then also review the questions. So let's just go ahead and get things rolling. Chad, with you. Can you give everyone just a general overview of the Payroll Protection Program?
Sure. Before I do that, let's give a little background. When the first program came out of March of last year, and that Relief Bill Act by Congress, it came out in March in a time of great uncertainty. And people were really wondering what's going to happen, what's going to be the impact that came. And the PPP program first round offered help in a time of uncertainty. And what it did is we weren't sure at the time how deep the impact would be, how we would be impacted, how things would change. And so it really boosted up the economy. It helped businesses transform business plans to adapt to the current environment that was happening. And so as we move into this next phase, this next wave of relief, they wanted to do the same thing, except they really wanted to help those individuals that were hit a little bit harder. So $284 billion was set aside to help the most impacted businesses during this pandemic. So even before I get into that, I'd like to just talk a little bit about some of the terms maybe we're going to use today. The first program we'll sometimes call PPP-1. Sometimes we'll even call it First Draw. This new program that has come out, also known as PPP-2, sometimes you'll hear us refer to it as the Second Draw. Now we call it First Draw, Second Draw. The reality is there was a loan for the first one, and there's a second loan for the next one. So they are two distinct loans that are given to customers. So what was the use of these funds to be used for? Well, they were really there to help with payroll costs and expenses that were incurred for the situation. And so what we saw is that the calculation is really done off of payroll expenses. And that's how it is calculated. All the terms and everything for the second draw remained the same, but it was expanded to help with mortgage relief and rent, utilities, workers' protection costs, uninsured property damages that were caused in 2020 unrest, and certain supplier costs and expenses that were for PPP equipment. And so a lot has happened in the last year with the PPP program. Also, during the first round, there was this anxiety. Congress had allocated certain funds. Those funds were quickly depleted, which shut the program down. Congress did the right thing. They redeployed additional capital towards it, opened the program back up, and everyone who applied and wanted to received funds. However, that did cause some anxiety. And so we see that kind of bleeding over into this program where people are feeling that anxiety of, is there going to be enough funds? Do we have enough for what we need? And so people have been really anxious for this program. However, what we have seen and what we continue to see is that the funding that was supplied, the $284 billion, appears to be sufficient for all those that want to apply. Just to give a little update, SBA came out with some numbers this last Sunday. At that time, 891,000 loans were approved, and that was for $73 billion out of that $284 billion allocated. So that means 26% of the funds have been used. So there still is sufficient funds out there, and we're excited to help customers with getting that qualify to apply. So let's talk about what's happening in Alaska and how those funds have been used. Right now, as of the 31st of January, 2,217 loans have been approved for a total of $229 million for Alaska. First National Bank has already we've approved by the SBA 823 loans. That is 36% of the loans that are out there, and we've received 41% of the allocated funds so far. So we're really doing a great job. Our loan officers are working so hard to help the customers, and there's such a desire to see customers get these funds to help our economy. I'm really impressed with loan officers and what they're doing out there. They're really working hard. They're working as late as they need to, weekends, to really help people get those funds. So that's kind of where we are with the program right now, Denise, and there's still a lot more to do in the program.
Yeah, and I don't think, at the beginning of this pandemic, no one could have ever anticipated that we'd be here, 10, 11 months later. And so it's really wonderful to see that Congress deployed another round of funding because, as bankers, we know how the economy works here in Alaska. And our industries have been hit hard, and we work right alongside Alaskans who are really feeling it. And so thanks for that great overview two, and that distinction between round one and round two. And it's nice to know that only, I think you said like 26% of the funding thus far has been allocated or at least secured by borrowers. And so if folks are out there and if you think that you may qualify, if you're not sure, just pick up the phone, call your banker. We have a lot of information posted on fnbaalaska.com and some basic questionnaires and information that will allow you to make your own determination. But if you're not sure, just speak with a local banker because we're here to help. So a lot of the questions that we get are related to forgiveness. In fact, I would say a lion's share of our questions that we had come in from the first webinar had a lot to do with forgiveness. So Carl, can I hand it over to you now to give us a little bit more information about full forgiveness terms and what that might mean for Alaskans?
Certainly, Denise. So as Chad talked a bit about how the loan process works, and the Payroll Protection Program is a loan that's given to be used for eligible expenses. If those funds are used in accordance with the guidelines for those eligible expenses, then the forgiveness process starts and that loan is forgiven and paid off by the SBA. So the forgiveness process starts with saving all of the information for eligible expenses for a covered period. The covered period is either 8 or 24 weeks at the borrower's choice. So the covered expenses for the second round PPP are very similar to the first round, and that includes payroll, utilities, rent expense, interest on mortgage, and what was added to the second round was some cloud-based server expenses that people may have incurred for at home or remote work, and also PPE to keep the work environment safe. So right now we have a whole team of loan officers that's not only working on helping people with forgiveness for their first round loans, but also collecting the information for the second round. And as you said, Denise, there is lots of information on our website, fnbaalaska.com, and also loan officers all over the state ready to assist with exactly what may be an eligible expense, because what we want to help people do is make sure that they get these loans and they save all the adequate documentation so they get them forgiven. A couple of the big points about forgiveness are 60% of all the expenses must be spent on payroll. That was a change from the very beginning when they had said 75% of overall. That has been reduced to 60, and that remains the same for first draw and second draw. So again, as you're going through the process, remember that the covered period, make sure you save all of your payroll receipts or payroll expense records, as well as any other eligible expenses, so that you can make sure that the loan is fully forgiven at the end of the term.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
So 60% of the proceeds need to be spent on payroll costs. Is that right?
Yeah, and it certainly can be more than that, but it's that gives some room for rent expenses, other things. And what we found with many of our customers through the pandemic is they had expenses that, were very unusual. They had to retool their business, and some of those, again, with the PPE and other things, they can find ways to make sure that their loan is fully forgiven.
Right. And I think you bring up a really good point there, Carl. It's not just, although the overall intention of the payroll protection program is to help keep Americans, on the payroll, right? It's to help keep Americans employed. But there are other expenses that are associated with managing a business during a pandemic. Whether business owners are trying to meet regulatory requirements or temporary municipal codes, to try and reduce the spread of the virus. So 60% for payroll, but then the loan can also be used for additional expenses as well. That's good clarification. Thank you. And so, Chad, what can you tell us in terms of eligibility requirements for a PPP loan? What are the basics for eligibility, and maybe even if there are any distinctions between first draw and second draw loans?
Of course. The first thing is that, like I mentioned before, is that the second draw loans, those PPP2s, were really meant for those businesses that were impacted the most in this pandemic. What they also did in this one is they also expanded some of the eligibility to nonprofits, live venues, and some of the cultural institutions that are out there too. And so obviously they didn't get a first one. And that's one of the things that they did with this act is they actually said, hey, if you did not get a PPP-1, we're going to go ahead and open that same program as before. Remember, that one was a little bit more lenient. 500 or less employees, you don't have to demonstrate a drop in revenue. You just have to provide and attest that there's some financial needs to receive those funds. So people can actually go ahead and apply for that if they don't get that first one. Some people think, well, I'm applying for the PPP-2. Technically, if you have not received a PPP-1, you can't get a PPP-2 yet. So keep that in mind. We've actually been really astonished with how many people are actually applying as a first-time applicant into this program. And we're really pleased to see that because some of those individuals, maybe they'd not heard about the program, maybe they didn't understand that they were eligible for the program, and so they're coming back and they're talking with bankers and finding out they can. And so that is a great news that they're able to do that. But like I said, there is some differences between PPP-1 and PPP-2. The calculation for the loan amount is the same. You still take that monthly payroll and you go 2.5 times. But let's talk about more of that second draw, that PPP-2. First, you have to attest that you have used all the funds in that first round, that you've used them for eligible expenses. Now, that can mean a couple different things. Maybe you didn't use all the funds up to 60%, but you did use all the funds all the way through all the other eligible expenses, and then that would qualify you for your second round draw. So that's the first thing, first step. Did I use all the funds? The second one is they lowered the amount of employees from 500 to 300. The next thing that they did is they said they wanted businesses that can demonstrate that they had at least a 25% drop in their gross receipts. Now, you can demonstrate that drop in two different ways. The first one is a quarter-to-quarter comparison. So what I would do is I would look at a quarter in 2019 comparative to a quarter in 2020. You can use your own internal documents to do that, financials to do that. If you decide you want to look at on an annual basis, then what happens in that scenario is you would look at your 2019 tax returns, and then we would look at your 2020 tax returns, and you would do a comparison to see if there's a 25% drop. Now, I know many of you are already thinking, well, wait a second, I have not done my taxes yet for 2020, and most people have not. You are able to use a draft form of those tax returns to be able to show that 25% on an annual basis. So when you do that, then you hit the qualifications. The other thing that they did that's a little bit different this time is they also put a lower cap on it. And that cap went from $10 million down to $2 million. Now, technically, there is an aggregate amount if you have multiple companies or you're a 20% owner in multiple companies, that maximum amount can go to $4 million. And so once again, you would just want to check with your loan officer, talk about your different companies and how you're related to them to make sure that you don't exceed that amount. The other thing that they did in this time is they really understood that those people in the hotel and food industry were severely impacted. And so they wanted to give a little bit more money to them. The way that they have identified these individuals are through their NAICS code. And that is NAICS code that starts with 72. So you can ask your accountant where that is. It might be located on your business license. Sometimes it's even you can even locate it on your tax returns in the top section of your tax returns. But that you can identify if you qualify as one of those more severely hit industries. If you are one of those industries, then at that time when we do our payroll calculation, we do one little thing differently. Instead of timesing it by 2.5, we times it by 3.5 times, which is a great benefit because we know in Anchorage, we've seen it all over the state, restaurants that have struggled with closures and mandates, that they have been hit, and they continue to struggle, as some of them are able to adapt to different ways of takeout, but some of these sit-in diners have really been hit pretty hard, Denise. So it's great that they're looking out for those individuals. And even some of our tourism in the hotel industry also are going to be able to receive that benefit. So back to you, Denise.
That's great. I mean, tourism plays a big part of our local economy here in Alaska. You know, we know that the lion's share of our economy is obviously fueled by oil and gas, but we know tourism is right up there. There are several other industries, and just, you know, even if you didn't know anything about the economy, we see our fellow Alaskans being impacted, particularly those who own and operate restaurants. So that's good to see those differences between draw one and draw two. We have one question that just came in, Chad, related to eligibility. And so the question is, can a person who received a PPP-1 apply for a PPP-2 if they didn't receive a 1099 in 2020 at all? So no Scheduled C in 2020. What's the answer to that?
So if I understand the question, this is a sole proprietor, and yet they don't get this actual payroll tax form that's in there. And the answer is, if they're a sole proprietor, they absolutely can apply for it. And the way that calculation works is this, is we look at your Schedule C, we get down to where the profit is shown, we divide that by 12, and then we times it by 2.5. Now, for those sole props that are not showing a profit for 2019, they would not qualify for the program at that time.
Okay. And here's another one for you. I'm just going to keep you on your toes. So the participant did verify that they are a sole proprietor. So thanks for that. So their follow-up question is, if you're going back and submitting a corrected PPP-1 to apply for seasonality, should you wait to apply for PPP-2 until you've heard back if you qualify for seasonality?
So that is a difficult one, but a very good question that we've had from many customers. And what I would recommend is this: let's go ahead and apply for your PPP-2, and go ahead and get that one in. Go ahead and get approved for it. You can do it with the new calculation. Then the process is a little bit different for those people who want to do a modification to their first one. That does not go through our portal. You actually need to talk with a loan officer, talk with them, fill out the application, look at your qualifications and what the difference from your first application was and your second one. Make sure you're doing it right. And then what we'll do is we have to go through the SBA through a different route, a different website, and then we can adjust your amount and reallocate those funds to you. So okay. A little bit more of a process for that.
Yeah, but I think a key message that you brought up, if you have any doubts, call your local banker, right? And although
it's absolutely doable.
Yep, because that's what they're here for, right? They're here to provide expertise and to guide Alaskans through this really important process. So no question is too small. So that's why we're here. We're here to help. So Carl, let's turn to you now. And can you just give Alaskans an overview of what they need to know about the application process and the timeline?
Certainly, Denise. So with the first round of PPP, we processed thousands of applications in a very short period of time, and we were given very short notice by the Treasury and SBA. So we were able to process them as efficiently as possible. As we had a little bit more time to prepare for the second round of PPP, the bank invested in a portal and technology to be able to accept this information as efficiently as possible. So First National Bank Alaska, along with all other national banks, were able to start accepting applications on January 19th. In preparation for that, we opened up the portal to begin collecting information, although we couldn't accept complete applications, to get ready so we could get those processed. We found that portal to be very efficient and has received excellent feedback from our customers. And the nice thing is you can go into the portal, start the process. If you don't have quite all the information you need to complete it, you can come back, your information is saved. And as soon as you have started the process of establishing your name, your business name, and user ID in the portal. A loan officer will see that. And if you need some help getting through the process, we have a whole team of loan officers that are ready to assist. And once that information is in there, if we need additional information, we can simply send a request and you can upload that to the portal. And it's really been a much more efficient process than the first time. And so the first step to applying is to go to the portal and can access that through the website, fnbalaska.com. And the portal will be open as long as SBA is taking applications. Right now, SBA has put a deadline on that as March 31st. So any SBA lender is able to help you with a PPP loan. You don't have to go to the same lender you went to as your first loan. If you had a PPP one with someone else, please come to us, go through the portal, and we're able to help you regardless of where you got your first PPP loan. Another common question that we have regarding the timeline is once you submit your application, the process time and the closing time, once we have approval from the SBA, we have 10 days to get you the documents and collect those signatures. So we're obviously going to meet all those guidelines as outlined by SBA. So it is a pretty quick process. We actually have a number of customers right now that would like to wait to have that start. Once we get approval, we have to issue the docs and disperse the money. So for customers that may want to wait because they want their covered period to start a little later, you can do that, but that is in your hands to not apply until you're ready, because once we receive approval, we have to comply and get those docs and disperse the money. Now, as Chad said, right now, there's been a very steady flow of money out, but there appears to be plenty of money for all that requested. But customers should be aware that if they do wait, they'd run the risk of the program possibly not having funds. So we are encouraging people to make sure that they're making the best choice for their business need. Although they may not be quite ready to start spending that money, the risk runs if you don't do it, you could run out. So Chad, I'll let you add on to that if you want, but that's kind of the timeline of the application process. Very simple on our end and very quick turnaround.
Yeah, I might just reiterate again, Carl might have mentioned it, but March 31st, 2021 is the end of when you can put your applications in. So get those applications in, get them processed. We do anticipate there being plenty of funds in there, but there's always that risk that is out there too. So go ahead and get them in and talk with a loan officer.
Okay, thanks you two. All great information. So March 31st is the deadline, and it's not an option if you want to apply and secure a PPP loan, but wait to have the funds dispersed. That has to happen actually per the SBA within a 10-day time frame. So thanks for the clarification on that. Carl, one last question that just came in related to application process and timeline, specifically second draw PPP loans. Do they have the same terms regardless of lender?
Yes, all of the guidelines for the PPP program are the same for any participating SBA lender. So regardless of which lender you go to, the terms are going to be the same. The process may look different as far as collecting information, depending on where people are doing that. But as far as the terms of the loan and the terms of the program for eligibility, repayment, and forgiveness will be the same regardless of institution.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we just had a question that came in that I think fits in nicely with qualification, eligibility. And the question reads, if you did have a Schedule C in 2019 and received a PPP-1, but didn't have a 1099 job in 2020 and will not have a Schedule C, can you apply for PPP-2? You're down certainly more than 25%. Should you just use the quarterly comparison with internal documents?
So a couple of things, I'll run with this one. So a couple of things in there. There's actually a few questions and qualifications in there. The first one is you do not need to supply any more information for the payroll and the loan amount than you did the first time. So if this individual supplied their 2019 Schedule C information, they would actually supply that once again, and that would still be used to come up with the calculation for the second draw loan. The second one is the 25% reduction. If an applicant has a loan amount below $150,000, and it sounds like in this case it might be, and they're still collecting information, some people don't have financials, it sounds like, that they can supply to show that 25% reduction. That's okay. For the application process, you do not need to supply that. When it comes when it comes time for forgiveness, you will have to supply information that shows that you had a 25% drop in your revenue at that time. The other thing to think about that in that 25% drop in revenue that I might have forgot to mention in my first eligibility is that you don't have to include your first PPP loan as revenue that you had in 2020. That is excluded from your revenue. And so that has been a concern with some individuals, but that is not part of that calculation.
Okay, thanks, Chad. And so, Chad, can you just give Alaskans a little bit more information in terms of First National's PPP approach and our process that we've established for folks?
Absolutely. The first thing I would tell you is go to our webpage, www.fnbalaska.com. Right there on the first opening page, you're going to see information about the PPP program. You're actually going to see in the right-hand corner, it's going to say PPP loan application. Learn more and apply here. Click on that. When you go to that, the next page you're going to see is on the right-hand side, there's actually a couple of checklists. We've got checklists up there for a first round and a second round. So you can look at what that is in that checklist. It's going to help you prepare and be ready for the information that is going to be required to get the loan. One of the things I would recommend also in preparing is to talk with your accountant, CPA, or whoever does your books. If that's you might want to talk a little more to your loan officer about it, or whoever might prepare your taxes to get that information together. That way you're ready for any questions that may be asked and help the process go a little bit smoother, a little bit quicker, so you're ready to answer as quickly as you can. Like I said, if you're under $150,000, those expectations are a little bit different. You can use the same information you supplied before, or it might be a better scenario and you may be able to get a little more money if you're using 2020 payroll information. But you can use either one of those. And as I mentioned, if you're under $150,000, you do not have to supply proof that you had a 25% drop at that time. We would still recommend it. If you have it, go ahead and get it in. Make sure it's in the process, already in the system. That way, when it comes time to forgiveness, you're not having to worry about that, and it's there. Sorry, like I said, you don't have to supply it at the beginning, but there are two scenarios in which when you will have to supply it. This first one is when you go to forgiveness, or the second one is if the SBA asks for it any time during the process. So once again, there's a lot to get ready for so you can have a smooth transition.
All right, so the first step is to visit fnbalaska.com, maybe check out those checklists for a first and second draw loan, and go from there. All right, so we have received a lot of good questions over the last 30 minutes or so. So Chad and Carl, thank you very much for the overview and for the very useful information. People are interested, they're engaged, and they want to know. So let's keep up the flow here. So one question that came in, a participant logged into the webinar asked, as we head into tax season, can you give general overview of PPP loan and forgiveness impacts on income taxes?
Carl, I can take this one if you want. Just to start off with, I would highly recommend always using a tax professional. I think it's always good to have the conversation with them and finding, they're going to stay up to date on the recent tax news and things that are happening. Loan officers are very knowledgeable. However, they're not tax professionals. So we do recommend that you do use a tax professional. But just kind of general overview of it. The first thing that we do know is you do not have to include it in your cells. We do know that. The other thing, though, that they came out with is we do know that any money that was used for some of the expenses are not supposed to be deducted on your tax returns. That's very general. That's what we know so far about taxes. However, like I said, a seasoned professional will be able to help you more with navigating through that process.
All right, thank you. All right, here's another question I'm going to throw at you guys. As a sole proprietor 1099 crewman, to apply for seasonality, do you look at when income landed in your checking account or when a fishing trip was delivered?
Chad, I can take that. So we've been have a lot of fishermen all throughout the state that we've been helping, and we have developed some guidelines based on the SBA's seasonality requirements. And one thing that has changed, Denise, is the first round of PPP, SBA used the word seasonal, but had no definition to what that meant. Now we have a clear definition of when the income can be, when the revenue can be earned. And we're working with fishermen because every situation is so different. We're working with them to be able to collect documentation on showing when that revenue was earned. So not necessarily landed in an account, but if we can collect adequate documentation, show the revenue was earned in a time period that meets the seasonality requirement, then you're able to apply for seasonality.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Carl. It looks like we have quite a few fishermen logged in today. So here's a couple of questions that are in the hopper related to seasonality and specifically the fishing industry. So the next question is, are sport charter fishermen able to use 1099 crew pay the same as other commercial fishermen?
That answer is yes. They are. It's there's not a differentiation on business type, just the payroll structure.
Okay. So here's another question related to the fishing industry. As a fishing boat owner, can I include payroll costs in my application for loan forgiveness or for compensation paid to a crew member who received their own PPP loan?
No, the guidance from the SBA is that it is the boat owner's responsibility to ensure that the crew members have not applied for their own PPP loan before they submit for forgiveness.
Thank you. All right, here's another question that just came in. The question reads, I have a business that operates under multiple NAICS codes, including hospitality, which allows for a higher PPP calculation amount. However, my business tax returns and filings don't list the 72 NAIC code first. Can I apply for a PPP loan as a hospitality business?
At
Chad,
this point, what we understand.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Right. And yeah, I'd love to have Carl weigh in on this one too. But you know, my understanding is this: is they're really fixed on that 72 NAICS code. Therefore, if your business does not have that, it does not qualify for the 3.5 times. I see the issue in here where what they've done is they've got an overall, operating entity, and then they've got other subsidiaries underneath it that would qualify for that 3.5 times. But they have been very, very specific. If, there needs to be a business license, something needs to be associated with that 72 code.
Okay, thank you, Chad. The next question is, I started my business after February 2020. Can I still obtain a PPP loan?
At this time, if the business was not in existence operating as of February 12th, 2020, they are not eligible for a PPP round 1 or round 2 advance.
Okay, so the key date to remember there is February 12th, 2020 for a PPP loan.
Yes.
Okay, great. A lot of good questions coming in, and so I hope we can get to all of them. But if we don't get to all the questions today, have no fear. We're going to compile all the questions submitted either via Facebook or if you're logged into the webinar, and we will post after today's webinar on fnbalaska.com/webinar all the answers to everyone's questions. So we're going to do the best that we can here in the next 20 minutes, but it's great to see that so many people are taking advantage of the information that you two have to offer today. So the next question is, if a business that was in operation on February, okay, did I just ask that question? I think I might have. Well, here we go again. If a business that was in operation on February 15th, 2020, but had a change in ownership after that, are they eligible for a PPP loan? So the differentiation there between the question I just asked and the last question was change of ownership.
No, absolutely, I can answer that. So they are eligible, actually, is what we understand, is that they can apply. Not only can they apply for a second one if the business before had one, but if the business did not have one before, they could apply for a first one. And so now that might cause some issues because of the change in ownership that just recently applied. So there's a couple of things that individual can do. The first thing they could do is they could contact the previous owner to get 2019 numbers. They could gather that information and they can submit that as their payroll information for this time. If they choose to, though, they could also use 2020 number payroll information, and then they can submit it under that also. But the key here is that they have to know if the business, because that is really who is requesting this. It's the business, not the owner of the business. And so it's important to find out if a PPP-1 has already been secured. If it has not, then you would apply simply for that first PPP-1. If a PPP-1 has been done, then they can do a second draw request.
All right, thanks, Chad. So the next question is, we're working on the loan amount calculator now, and we're running into a discrepancy. Last time, Social Security and Medicare contributions from the employer were included in the calculation, but it doesn't appear there's a place to input that on the new calculation. Seems odd. Is this correct?
I'll jump in and then Chad can go. I thought those were the same calculations as last time, so we can look and see at that calculator, but I didn't think that calculation had changed. Chad, did you hear otherwise?
No, it hasn't changed, but really that federal is excluded out of it, and it was excluded on the first round, but the state and the other ones are included. So it is correct through how the calculator is calculating it.
Okay, and so if the panelist or the participant that submitted that question, if you need additional clarification, please send us a good contact number for you, and I'd be happy to connect either Chad or Carl with you to provide some additional information related to the calculator. And so the next question reads, my business is LLC that files tax returns as an S corporation. When looking at the PPP loan application, which business type do I select, LLC or S Corp?
Denise, can you repeat that question?
Sure. The question reads, my business is LLC that files tax returns on an S corporation. When looking at the PPP loan application, which business type do I select, LLC or S Corp?
They should do it as an LLC. They should do it as the entity that they are.
So the business needs to select the legal entity for how their business was created, essentially. So if they were created as an LLC, then you click LLC.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. They should follow whatever legal entity that they are under. Yep.
Okay. All right, the next question is, Several years back, my accountant suggested paying my children with W-2s since they are exempt from Social Security wages and Medicare wages because they were under 18 years old and were working for a sole proprietor family business. Can I include wages that I paid them in my PPP loan calculation?
So the SBA rule on is pretty clear that the box 5C on your 941 is ineligible for eligible payroll. So that's the only number that can be used. So it comes back to how you completed the 941 tax return and what's in that box 5C.
And we have another question related to seasonal employment. So how does a seasonal employer calculate the maximum PPP loan amount?
So for seasonal employees, there's a 12-week period of payroll that can be used. And the payroll within that 12-week period is then divided by 3 to come up with the average monthly, and times by either 2.5 or 3.5, depending on the NAIC code.
And it's nice, Denise, because they can pick that 12-week period that is the most beneficial to them.
Okay, great. So that gives borrowers some flexibility. So a 12-week time frame, and they have the flexibility to pick what time frame that is, and that could really be their optimal time frame. And then that calculation is essentially, can you state that again? Was it 3.3% or
3.5 is what they would tell you.
3.5? Okay, great. The next question reads, if a seasonal employer received a PPP loan before December 27th, 2020, can the loan amount be increased based on a revised calculation of the maximum loan amount?
Yes, it can be, but the process is a little bit different. I think we might have mentioned it to where you're actually going to need to contact a loan officer, refill out that application, and then we need to go through the original process that was done with the SBA. So it can take a little bit of time, and we just ask people to be patient with it. But we can modify those loans, and we can go ahead and process them.
Okay, thanks, Chad. So the next question that just came in reads, I can document a drop in quarterly revenues of 24.91% year over year. Can this be rounded to 25% for qualifying purposes for a second draw PPP loan?
Denise, the guidance we've gotten from SBA is that 25 means 25. And if you're coming up with something less than that, even though it's 24.9, that does not meet the requirements. And SBA has written the rules on all of this, and we are doing our best to follow those rules, although sometimes they're a little strange to follow. That is the guidance we've got from them. So 25 means 25.
All right, so that's a good
point. What I would encourage people, and what I would encourage people is this, is that is the guidance that we've received so far. What we found with the first round is there were several times where things changed. As Carl mentioned, there was no definition of what a seasonal business was before. Now we've received guidance on what that seasonal business is. Now, could they maybe change something and allow for rounding? They may, but at this time, as Carl said, 25 means 25.
So we are following the guidance. There's no interpretation there. We really have to dot our I's and cross our T's related to following that guidance that's provided, and that's the expectation. So what happens in a situation when the rules do change and the SBA provides additional information? What is it that First National is doing to keep Alaskans informed, whether they're, have applied, whether they've not applied? What are the steps that our bankers are taking to make sure that Alaskans have the most up-to-date information related to SBA guidelines?
A couple things on that, Denise. Go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, Carl. No, you go ahead.
A couple things on that, Denise. Our loan officers are spending a lot of time with each one of the individual applicants and addressing the individual problems. But I would also say that our website, fnbaalaska.com, is a #1 resource that we're updating every week, often daily, with the most current information, changes as they come out. When we see a change to SBA that impacts a large amount of people, we do our best to not only post it on the website, but to get it out to all of the people that we have access to that we think could be impacted. But continuing to be in communication with your loan officer and checking regularly, fnbaalaska.com is the most effective way to make sure that you're getting all of the information that we have, and we are doing our best to get that pushed out as quick as we have it.
And that's the beauty of online, right? We can update information just as quickly as it comes in. It's not like we are publishing this information in a static, paper form. I mean, as you guys have your ears to the ground, I know you're constantly in SBA meetings, and that information is getting posted and being distributed to Alaskans just as soon as it changes. So thanks for sometimes working around the clock. I know there are a lot of people out there that really appreciate it. Another question that just came in related to first round and second round. So the question is, if I was denied for a $30,000 first round PPP loan application, will I be denied if I apply for a second round PPP loan?
Denise, we would encourage that individual to apply and to also maybe reach out to that loan officer to see if any of the qualifications have changed. There's so many different types of businesses and some reasons why they qualified and didn't qualify the first round, that, like we said, there was a lot of changes that happened and a lot of misunderstanding that happened on the first round because of the program coming out so quickly, so fast. More guidance has been given out. Like I also mentioned, the eligibility has increased in the last act. So like we said, there's some nonprofits that did not qualify the first go around. Now they do. There's also entertainment venues that are also qualifying now. And so the eligibility has increased, and so it could mean that some people that got denied the first round could possibly be eligible this time. So don't count yourself out just because of what happened the first time.
Yeah, for example, if you're a nonprofit organization, right? So now that funding is available for nonprofit organizations, whereas before it was not available. Great. Okay. Another question that just came in from someone who's logged into the webinar. Describe how you figure seasonality. So I'm not sure if that's a question, what the definition of seasonality is, but just off the cuff, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, let's talk about who is the definition of seasonality. The first thing is it's someone who, if you operate less than 7 months, correct, Carl?
Yes.
That's the first criteria. And then let's talk about revenue. Do you want to go over the revenue and the 33.3%, Carl?
Yeah, I'm getting the exact calculator pulled up here so I don't misquote it, Chad, but it has to do with the percentage. Again, the first round of PPP, we were largely just making some assumptions on what that meant, and just only with this next one have they outlined exactly what that what those numbers are. And I apologize. Denise, maybe we go to the next question and I'll come back with that formula.
And, Julie, if maybe you can just provide a good contact information, we can follow up with you as well, but we'll certainly get the right answer. And, all the question and answers will be posted following this webinar on fnbaalaska.com/webinar. So this question comes from the restaurant industry. I own a restaurant with 2 locations. For purposes of calculating if quarterly revenues dropped by 25% or more, do I need to add both store revenues together, or can I count each location separately? So for example, same taxpayer EIN number for both stores. How does that work?
So our understanding when this first happened was it changed a little bit. We were told only one customer could have one PPP. Later on down the road, during the first one, what the definition of that came out is one PPP loan per tax identification code. So in this particular situation, because they have an operating company and all the other restaurants operate underneath that same tax ID number, all the calculations would have to flow up into that one PPP application, and they would have to put it in for that. If an individual had separate applications or separate tax ID numbers, then they could do it for each individual restaurant. So you want to make sure that you look at that carefully. Also, one thing I might point out is some people, what they've done is they have holding companies. And maybe this is too far into the weeds, but they have holding companies and then they have operating companies. Well, you really got to look at where the payroll comes through. And you got to look at that tax ID number where the payroll is being put through. One good way of looking at it is look at your 941s, see what tax identification number is on those 941s, and that is where all of those should be put towards into one application.
Okay, thank you, Chad. So a lot of great questions were asked today. As we are rounding the hour now, I'm starting to see a lot more thank yous coming through, less questions. Folks just are expressing their appreciation for you, Chad, and Carl taking the time to answer their questions directly and being accessible. And so, I think you guys probably share, my remarks, which is, you're welcome. We're happy to be here. It's what we do. It's who we are as, a community bank. We work alongside Alaskans. We have families. We're vested in Alaska, and we're here to help folks get through this challenging time. So in the next couple of minutes, is there anything that you'd like to say or just recap quickly that you think are the finer points of PPP funding?
Denise, I'll start off, and I will real quick give that seasonal calculation, and it says does not operate more than 7 months in a calendar year, or during a preceding calendar year, gross receipts for any 6 months were not more than 33.33% of the gross receipts for the other 6 months. So I think that information is also posted on our website, but that is the seasonal definition. If that's not out there, we'll make sure that it gets out there as a resource. And as far as closing comments for the PPP, just encourage folks to get into the portal, get their information entered, talk with a loan officer. Every situation is a little bit different. We have processed thousands of these between the first round and the second round, and we've seen most scenarios, and we're really able to help get through the process and get Alaskans help where they need it. So go to the website, fnbalaska.com, talk to a loan officer, and that's what I have.
Thanks, Carl. Chad, any last minute words of advice or expertise you can share with us?
Carl did a great job of summarizing. I just say, hey, I think we've said it many times, talk to a local loan officer, and we hope that we're going to be able to help everyone with their PPP application. That being said, that is not the only service that we provide. We're a full service bank. We have the opportunity to help you with other needs. The reality is that we are relationship driven. And so we want to form relationships with our customers. And we want to help them not just with the PPP, but with all other things that they're involved in and be part of their businesses. So come on in, be part of the Fnba family, and let's do some business together.
All right. Thanks so much, Chad. So one last comment that just came in from Julie, and she simply says, "You rock." And I agree. I think, just having the two of you, being with you this last hour, sometimes I think, as a banker myself, I feel like I've heard it all related to PPP. This is what we've been living for the last 10 months or so. But every time we get together and we go over questions that folks are interested in getting the answers to, I myself learn a lot more. And I think that sometimes this can be a very complicated and daunting process for Alaskans. And you guys just make it seem a lot easier than maybe what we think it might be. So thanks so much for your time. Thanks to everybody who participated via the webinar today. Thanks to all Alaskans who are watching this event live on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please visit our website, fnbaalaska.com/webinar, and we're here to help. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Denise.